The sky doesn't remember how to be blue anymore. During the day, it hangs overhead like a faded canvas, washed out gray when dust particles aren't thick enough to choke the air, or burnt orange when they are. At night, there are more stars than anyone alive remembers seeing before the flare. No light pollution, no cities glowing on the horizon, just darkness so complete it feels like the Earth has been erased, leaving only the universe above to remind us we still exist somewhere in the cosmic void. It's beautiful in the way a graveyard is beautiful, peaceful, silent, and utterly devoid of life's messy vitality. The temperature doesn't know what it wants to be anymore either. Summer days crack the thermometer at 125 degrees in the shade, if you can find shade. The sun beats down with an intensity that feels personal, like it's angry at us for what we did to the planet, for how we ignored the warnings. By mid-afternoon, the air shimmers and warps, turning the horizon into a liquid mirage. Metal surfaces become weapons, touch a car door, a fence post, anything that's been sitting in direct sunlight, and your skin blisters instantly. Then winter comes, and it comes with a vengeance that seems impossible after such brutal heat. -30, -40 on the worst nights. No power means no heat. People freeze in their homes, in their beds, wrapped in every piece of fabric they own. The land itself has transformed into something unrecognizable. The Midwest, once called America's breadbasket, is now a dust bowl that would make the 1930s look like a minor inconvenience. Topsoil that took thousands of years to form has simply blown away, leaving behind hardpan and rocks and the skeletal remains of farms that used to feed millions. Windbreaks of trees stand dead and bleached white, their branches reaching upward like hands begging for mercy that never comes. Abandoned tractors sit rusting in fields that will never see another harvest, their tires deflated, their mechanical guts exposed to the elements. Interstate highways have disappeared under drifts of dust in some places, while in others the asphalt has cracked and buckled from the temperature extremes, creating obstacle courses of broken concrete that make travel nearly impossible. What used to be cities are now monuments to hubris. Kansas City, St. Louis, Omaha, these names still appear on old maps, but the places they represent have ceased to function as anything resembling civilization. The fires burned for months after the flare, consuming everything flammable in massive urban infernos that no one could fight. What the fires didn't take, the looters did. What the looters didn't take, time and weather are slowly reclaiming. Skyscrapers stand as hollow shells, their windows blown out, their interiors gutted. Some have partially collapsed, leaning against their neighbors like drunk friends too tired to stand alone. The streets are graveyards of abandoned vehicles, their doors left open by people who fled on foot when the traffic jams became permanent. Shopping centers and strip malls have been picked clean, their shelves empty, their walls covered in desperate graffiti, dates, names, messages to loved ones who will never see them. The coasts fared even worse. Rising seas and hurricane strength, storms battered cities already crippled by the electromagnetic pulse. Miami is underwater. New York flooded, froze, flooded again. Without pumps, without power, without infrastructure, coastal populations had nowhere to go but inland, and inland wasn't ready for the influx, wasn't capable of handling millions of refugees when it couldn't even take care of its own. The mass migration lasted about 6 months before it simply stopped, not because people reached safety, but because there weren't enough people left moving. Government exists only as a memory and a few scattered pockets of delusional authority. FEMA never showed up because FEMA ceased to exist when the communication networks died. The military fragmented, some units tried to maintain order, others became warlords, most just deserted to find their families. Congress never reconvened. Half its members died in Washington, D.C. when the city collapsed into chaos, the rest scattered to the winds. There is no president, no federal system, no organized response to the cascade of catastrophes. Power abhors a vacuum, though, and what's emerged in civilization's absence is a patchwork of survivor communities, each with its own rules, its own leadership, its own chances of making it through another winter. Some communities are genuine attempts at rebuilding, shared resources, democratic decisions, everyone contributing what they can. Others are feudal nightmares, ruled by whoever had the most guns and the least conscience when society fell. Raiders move between settlements like locusts, taking what they want, killing anyone who resists. There are rumors of cannibals in the dead cities, of disease outbreaks that spread unchecked, of children who have never seen electric light or tasted fresh fruit. The things that used to bind us together, laws, morality, shared cultural values, have become negotiable, regional, temporary. Survival is the only universal language left, and it's a brutal, unforgiving dialect that most people are still learning to speak. My name is Elena Vasquez, though that hardly matters anymore. Names feel like relics from the old world, labels from a time when identity was tied to social security numbers and credit scores and professional titles. But I suppose if you're listening to this broadcast, if you're out there somewhere cranking a generator or running on scavenged batteries, you might want to know who's on the other end of this signal. You might want to know that there's an actual person behind the voice, not just another automated emergency message looping endlessly into the void. I was 34 when the flare hit. A meteorologist, actually, worked for the National Weather Service out of the regional office in North Platte, Nebraska. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent my career predicting weather patterns, tracking storm systems, issuing warnings about tornadoes and blizzards and flash floods. I understood climate change on an academic level, saw the data trends, knew what was coming in the abstract. But knowing and experiencing are two different countries separated by an ocean of denial. I knew the climate was destabilizing. I didn't truly understand what that meant until I was living in it, breathing dust instead of air, watching the sky refuse to produce rain month after month after month. Before the collapse, I had a routine. Coffee at 6 in the morning, briefing at 7, data analysis until lunch, public forecasts in the afternoon, home by 6 to my apartment where my cat Minerva would be waiting, judging me for being late with her dinner. I had a boyfriend, Daniel, a civil engineer who worked on water infrastructure projects. We talked about getting married someday, having kids someday, buying a house someday, always later. We were young enough to believe we had unlimited tomorrows to spend. The flare took Daniel in the most mundane way possible. He was driving to a job site when every electronic system in his truck died simultaneously. No power steering, no brakes, just a 2-ton machine suddenly obeying only gravity and momentum on a highway full of other vehicles doing the same. The pileup stretched for 3 miles. I never found his body. Never got to say goodbye. For months, I kept expecting him to walk through a door that no longer existed, back to an apartment that had been looted and burned. Grief in the apocalypse is a luxury you can't afford, so I packed it away and focused on survival. But it's still there, a weight I carry alongside the hand-crank radio and the water purification tablets. Minerva lasted longer than most pets. She was a survivor that cat hunted mice, drank from puddles, found warm places to sleep when the temperatures dropped. But malnutrition got her eventually. She just got thinner and thinner until one morning she didn't wake up. I buried her behind the radio station, marked the grave with a piece of rebar and a strip of metal I etched her name into. Stupid, maybe, to waste energy on funeral rites for a cat when humans were dying by the thousands. But she was the last piece of my old life, the last thing that knew me as Elena the person instead of Elena the survivor. I ended up at this radio station by accident and necessity combined. After the National Weather Service dissolved, hard to forecast whether without satellites or Doppler radar or, a functioning government, I wandered for a while. Tried joining a community in Kearney, but it fell apart when the well water became contaminated. Tried going solo, but humans aren't built for complete isolation. We are social creatures even when society has ended. I was passing through what used to be a town called Kozad when I found the station, KZADM, still standing when most of the town had been scavenged to the ground. The previous broadcaster was dead, I found him at the desk, slumped over the microphone, dead maybe 3 months based on the decomposition. Heart attack, I think, or maybe just gave up. Both are common enough, but he'd left behind something valuable, a working setup. The transmitter, an emergency hand crank generator, backup batteries that were dead but could be replaced, a whole library of technical manuals on how to maintain broadcast equipment, and a logbook where he documented every broadcast, every contact, every piece of information he'd shared. His name was Harold Zimmerman. He'd been a radio man for 43 years, started back when everything was analog and tubes. The last entry in his log said, Day 892, no contacts today, no contacts yesterday, still broadcasting, someone has to. I've been continuing his work for 355 days now. Every morning I crank the generator, 47 turns for 90 seconds of power, that's the magic number, and I broadcast. Whether observations, survival tips, information about water sources, and which areas to avoid. I share what I know about atmospheric conditions, about how to read the sky when you don't have satellites or computer models. I relay messages between the few other voices still out there on the airwaves. I play music sometimes, songs from the old world recorded on vinyl, because vinyl survived when digital files died with their storage devices. Creedence Clearwater Revival, Fleetwood Mac, Patsy Cline. Sounds from a world that believed in tomorrow. What keeps me going? That's the question, isn't it? Some days I'm not sure. Survival instinct is powerful. The body wants to keep living even when the mind questions why. But it's more than just biological imperative. It's responsibility, I think. Harold kept broadcasting because someone had to. Now I keep broadcasting because someone has to. Because there are people out there, scattered and alone and desperate for connection, who need to hear another human voice, who need to know they're not the last person alive on a dead planet. And maybe it's hope, though that word feels fragile as spun glass. Hope that this isn't the end, just a terrible middle. Hope that humans are resilient enough, adaptable enough, stubborn enough to build something from these ruins. Hope that somewhere my sister Maria is still alive. She was in Sacramento when the flare hit, and I haven't heard from her since, but no news could mean anything. Hope that the children being born into this broken world will know something better than what we've given them. I survive by being useful. Knowledge is currency now, and I have knowledge, how to predict storms without technology, how to find water, how to read the environment. I trade information for supplies. Travelers pass through sometimes, and we barter. I tell them which routes are passable and which communities are safe. They give me canned goods or batteries or news from other regions. I maintain the station, keep the equipment working, solve problems with ingenuity and scavenged parts. I ration carefully, 1 meal a day, 2 if I've been physically active. I collect rainwater when the sky remembers how. I've learned to shoot the revolver I found in Harold's desk drawer, though I've only fired it twice, both times at wild dogs that were bolder than they should have been. But mostly, I survive by talking, by turning that crank and speaking into the microphone and believing that somewhere in the static and distance, someone is listening, that I'm not just a voice shouting into emptiness, that connection still matters, even now, especially now. My hands have calluses from the generator crank. My body is leaner than it's ever been, muscle and sinew with no excess. My hair is long because there's no point in cutting it. I wear Harold's old jacket because it's warm and practical. I'm not the person I was before the flare, that Alina died with the old world, but I'm still here, still breathing, still broadcasting, still hoping that tomorrow the rain will come, or a friendly voice will crackle through the static, or some small thing will happen that makes cranking this generator 47 more times feel worth it. The crisis isn't singular. That's what people don't understand, or maybe what they can't afford to understand, because the full scope of it is too overwhelming to process. It's not just one disaster. It's a cascading failure, each catastrophe triggering the next in a domino effect that keeps accelerating. But if I had to name the thing that's killing us most efficiently right now, the thing that wakes me up at night with my heart pounding and my mouth dry as sand, it's the drought. The endless, merciless, soul-crushing drought. It's been 14 months since the last significant rainfall in this region. 14 months. Before the collapse, that would have been a statistical anomaly, a once-in-a-century event that would trigger federal disaster declarations and emergency aid. Now it's just Tuesday, just the new normal in a world where normal has been redefined to mean barely survivable. The sky looks like it might rain sometimes, clouds gather, darken, you can smell that electric petrichor smell that used to mean a storm was coming. But then the clouds just dissipate, pull apart like cotton candy, and the sun comes back out to bake the earth harder. Let me explain what's happening from a meteorological perspective, because understanding the mechanism doesn't make it less terrifying, but it at least makes it comprehensible. The jet stream, that ribbon of fast-moving air in the upper atmosphere that guides weather patterns, has become unstable. Before the flare, before the grid went down, and we lost our ability to respond to climate change, the jet stream was already showing signs of weakening and meandering. The Arctic was warming faster than the equator, reducing the temperature gradient that drives the jet stream's circulation. What we're seeing now is an extreme version of that destabilization. The jet stream has locked into a pattern meteorologists used to call it an omega block because of its shape on weather maps. High-pressure systems get stuck in place for weeks, months, and they act like atmospheric dams. Storm systems can't move through. Precipitation gets diverted around these blocks, dumping rain and snow on some regions in devastating quantities while leaving others completely dry. We're on the wrong side of the block, the dry side. And without satellite data, without weather balloons, without the computational models we used to rely on, I can't tell you when or if this pattern will break. The Platte River stopped flowing in June of last year. I watched it die in stages. First it became a series of disconnected pools, then the pools shrank and turned stagnant and green with algae, then they were just damp spots in the sand, and then even those evaporated. The riverbed is a highway now for travelers and raiders, a corridor of cracked mud cutting through the landscape. All the communities that depended on that water gone, dispersed, dead. The Platte used to flow year-round. It sustained ecosystems, agriculture, human settlements for thousands of years. Now it's a scar of dry earth that serves as a reminder of what we've lost. The aquifer is failing too. The Ogallala Aquifer, one of the world's largest underground water reserves, stretches beneath 8 states and used to hold enough water to fill Lake Huron. We've been mining it for decades, pumping out water faster than precipitation could recharge it, and the water table has been dropping for years. But now, without the infrastructure to drill deep wells, without electricity to run pumps, most of that water might as well be on another planet. The shallow wells have run dry. The hand pumps that still work are producing less and less, and what does come up is often brackish, contaminated with minerals and salts from the deeper layers. I'm down to 3 gallons of clean water, 3 gallons. I collected it from a rain shower 6 weeks ago, barely a sprinkle really, but I had every container I own set out to catch it. 3 gallons is roughly 2 weeks of survival if I'm extremely careful. A cup to drink in the morning, a cup in the evening, nothing for washing, nothing for cooking beyond what moisture is already in the canned goods I eat. I've stopped sweating, which is a bad sign. It means my body is dehydrated enough that it's conserving every drop, prioritizing vital functions over temperature regulation. I get dizzy when I stand up too quickly. My lips are cracked and bleeding. My urine is dark amber, almost brown. This is what dying of thirst looks like in slow motion, and I'm one of the lucky ones because I have those 3 gallons. There are people out there with nothing, drinking from contaminated sources because the choice is between maybe dying from dysentery or definitely dying from dehydration. Cholera has made a comeback, typhoid. Diseases we thought we'd conquered with modern sanitation are killing people again because we don't have clean water, don't have sewage treatment, don't have the medical infrastructure to treat the sick. Food is becoming scarce too, though it's a secondary crisis compared to water. You can survive weeks without food. You can't survive more than 3 or 4 days without water. But the two problems are interconnected. Crops need water, livestock need water, food preservation needs water. The canned goods I've been relying on are running out. The stockpiles have been picked over, fought over, hoarded, and depleted. I've got maybe 3 weeks of food left if I ration strictly. Mostly canned vegetables, some beans, a few tins of mystery meat that expired years ago but should still be safe if the seals are intact. There's no fresh food anymore, no gardens producing vegetables, no fruit trees bearing crops. The soil is dead, depleted of nutrients, dried to powder, blowing away in the dust storms that roll through every few weeks. I tried growing something once, back when I first arrived at the station. Found some heirloom seeds in an abandoned house, prepared a small plot, watered it carefully with my precious reserves. The seeds germinated. Tiny green shoots pushed through the earth, and for a moment I felt something like joy. Then the temperature hit 118 degrees 3 days in a row, and the seedlings withered despite my efforts to shade them. The heat just cooked them in the ground. The temperature extremes are getting worse, and that's accelerating every other problem. Last summer, we had 43 consecutive days above 115 degrees. The heat dome just settled over the region and couldn't move because of that blocked jet stream pattern. Animals died in their burrows and dens. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight. People died too, heat stroke, dehydration, organ failure. Bodies decompose quickly in that kind of heat, which is a mercy in some ways because it means disease doesn't spread as easily. But it also means you can't always properly bury people. The ground is too hard to dig, so the bodies get scavenged by what few animals are left, scattered and returned to the ecosystem in the least dignified way possible. Then winter comes, and it swings just as extreme in the opposite direction. -40 last January, the kind of cold that kills in minutes if you're exposed, the kind of cold that makes your lungs hurt when you breathe. I've insulated this station as best I can, sealed cracks, hung tarps and blankets, created a small core area that I can keep marginally warm with a kerosene heater. But fuel is scarce. I've got maybe 2 gallons of kerosene left, and I'm saving it for the absolute worst nights. Most of the time, I just bundle in layers, Harold's jacket, sweaters I've scavenged, sleeping bags, wool blankets, and try to conserve body heat. I've woken up with frost on the inside of my sleeping bag. That's not a metaphor. Actual ice crystals from my breath freezing in the air. The environmental destruction feeds on itself. Without vegetation, the soil erodes. Without soil, nothing can grow. Without plants, there's no transpiration adding moisture to the atmosphere, no root systems holding the earth together. The dust storms are getting bigger and more frequent. They roll in like brown tsunamis, walls of particulate matter that block out the sun and choke everything in their path. The dust is so fine it gets into everything: eyes, nose, throat, lungs. I've got cloth masks that I wear, scarves wrapped around my face, but they only help so much. I can feel the grit between my teeth. I cough up brown phlegm every morning. The last major dust storm lasted 8 days. 8 days of darkness, of howling wind, of the station creaking and groaning under the assault. I sealed myself inside, taped plastic sheeting over every gap and crack, and waited it out. The air inside got stale and thin. Carbon dioxide built up. I started getting headaches, feeling nauseous. But opening a vent would have meant letting in the dust, and breathing that storm would have destroyed my lungs. So I waited, rationed my air like I ration water and food. When it finally cleared, there were drifts of dust 3 feet high against the station walls. The solar panels I'd been maintaining were completely buried. It took me 2 days to dig them out, and even cleaned off, their efficiency is diminished. The dust scours the surfaces, scratches the glass, degrades their function with each storm. I'm not the only one struggling. The few other voices I'm in contact with report similar conditions or worse. Shepard in Omaha says his community is down to 17 people from 43. Disease, dehydration, violence over resources. They're rationing their water so strictly that people are getting weak, unable to work, unable to defend themselves when raiders come. Prophet in the Rockies has water from snowmelt, but she's dealing with wildfires. The forests are tinder dry, and lightning strikes set blazes that burn unchecked because there's no one to fight them, no infrastructure to contain them. She's had to relocate twice this summer, moving her broadcast equipment higher into the mountains, away from the flames. Canary went silent 3 weeks ago, just stopped transmitting mid-sentence. Could be equipment failure, could be raiders. Could be they finally ran out of whatever was keeping them alive. I call out during every broadcast, hoping to hear that familiar voice crackle back through the static, but there's nothing, just empty frequencies and white noise. That's how it happens. Voices disappear one by one, the network of survivors growing smaller and more isolated. Soon I might be the only one left broadcasting, and then eventually I'll go silent too, and that will be the end of human communication on these frequencies. The crisis is also fundamentally a resource crisis. Every single thing we took for granted in the old world has become precious and finite. Batteries are worth their weight in food. A working solar panel is treasure beyond measure. Medicine, even basic things like antibiotics, pain relievers, antiseptics, is essentially gone. I cut my hand 2 months ago on a sharp piece of metal while scavenging. A minor injury, nothing serious. But without antibiotic ointment, without the ability to properly clean it, it got infected. My hands swelled up, red streaks started climbing my arm. I honestly thought that might be how I'd die, not starvation or dehydration or raiders, but blood poisoning from a stupid cut. I fought the infection with the only thing I had, heat. Boiled water, precious water I could barely spare, and soaked my hand in it as hot as I could stand. Drew out the infection, or at least slowed it enough for my immune system to catch up. The scar is still there, raised and pink. Every day is a calculation of diminishing returns. I burn calories cranking the generator, so I need to eat to have the energy to broadcast, but food is scarce, so I need to limit broadcasts to conserve energy. But broadcasting is the only thing keeping me connected to the few survivors left, the only thing making my survival meaningful beyond simple biological persistence. I spend water to stay alive, but I need to save water in case the drought continues. But if I don't drink enough, I'll become too weak to gather more when it finally does rain. Every decision is a gamble with stakes I can't afford to lose. The solar panels help when they're not buried in dust. They charge batteries that give me a few hours of passive power, enough to keep the transmitter on standby, enough to run a small LED light, enough to make the hand crank generator less essential. But solar panels degrade over time, especially without maintenance and replacement parts. They're operating at maybe 60% efficiency now, and that number drops with every dust storm, every hailstorm, every day of temperature extremes that warp and crack the components. I've started having conversations with myself about the endgame. How much longer can I survive here? At what point does survival become impossible? At what point should I stop broadcasting and use my remaining energy to try to walk somewhere else, find a community, search for better conditions? But where would I go? The drought extends in every direction as far as I can determine. North, south, east, west, it's all the same slow death by dehydration. At least here I have shelter, I have equipment, I have purpose. The scientific part of my brain keeps trying to find patterns, to predict when conditions might improve. I watch the sky obsessively, noting every cloud formation, every shift in wind direction, every change in barometric pressure on the mechanical gauge I maintain. I'm looking for signs that the blocking pattern might break, that the jet stream might shift, that rain might finally return in meaningful quantities. But pattern recognition requires data, and my data set is limited to what I can observe directly. I can't see the bigger picture anymore. I'm like someone trying to understand a massive painting while standing with their nose pressed against one tiny corner of the canvas. What I do know is this: we're in a feedback loop. The drought kills vegetation, which reduces atmospheric moisture, which makes drought more likely. The heat intensifies evaporation, which dries out soil, which reduces the land's ability to moderate temperature, which makes heat more intense. We've pushed the climate system past a tipping point, and it's falling toward a new equilibrium, one that might not include human survival in this region. Maybe anywhere. This is the crisis. Not one disaster, but a spiral of interconnected catastrophes that make survival harder with each passing day. And I'm running out of time, out of water, out of options. The question isn't whether I can survive indefinitely. The question is whether I can survive long enough for something to change, long enough for rain, long enough for help, long enough for hope to be rewarded instead of punished. The hand crank generator sits beside me, waiting for its 47 turns. My water containers sit in the corner, their weight telling the story of how much time I have left. And outside, the sky continues its cruel routine of looking like rain might come while delivering nothing but relentless, killing heat. Survival is measured in days now, maybe hours. And I'm broadcasting these words because someone needs to document what's happening. Someone needs to say that we were here, we tried, we held on as long as we could, even if no one is listening anymore. The water situation became critical on day 17 of my final countdown. I was down to half a gallon, maybe 2 days if I pushed my body to the absolute limit of dehydration. My hands shook when I tried to crank the generator. 47 turns felt like 400. I'd stopped broadcasting daily updates and switched to every other day to conserve energy, which felt like failure. Like I was giving up in increments, dying by degrees. That's when I heard the engine. The sound came from the east, distant but distinct, a mechanical growl that didn't belong in this dead world. My first instinct was to hide. Vehicles meant people, and people meant danger. Raiders had trucks, cobbled together from scavenged parts and running on hoarded fuel or homemade biodiesel. They traveled in packs, hit isolated locations, took everything worth taking and burned the rest. I'd avoided them so far by being small, quiet, invisible, by being not worth the effort. I killed the transmitter even though I was mid-broadcast, grabbed the revolver from Harold's desk drawer, checked the cylinder even though I knew exactly how many rounds I had. 4, I'd fired 2 at the wild dogs, traded 1 for information from a passing traveler, and used 1 to put down a wounded deer that had wandered into the station yard, half dead from dehydration. 4 bullets. Not enough for a real fight, but enough to make a statement if it came to that. The engine sound grew louder, then stopped. Close, maybe 100 yards. I could hear voices now, muffled through the station walls. Male voices, at least 2 of them. My heart hammered against my ribs. The revolver felt heavy and inadequate in my hand. Then came the knock. 3 measured raps on the station door. Raiders don't knock. Hello in there, a man's voice, rough but not aggressive. We picked up your broadcast. We're not here to cause trouble. We've got information you'll want to hear. I stayed silent, weighing options. It could be a trap. A way to get me to open up, lower my guard, but raiders wouldn't bother with pretense. They'd just break in. My name's Jacob Reeves, the voice continued. I'm traveling with a man called Porter. We came from a settlement 200 miles northeast. We've got news about water. Water. The word hit me like electricity. Slide your weapons under the door, I called out, my voice hoarse from dehydration. All of them. Then step back 20 feet. A pause, then, fair enough. I heard the scrape of metal on concrete. A hunting rifle slid under the gap at the bottom of the door. Then a pistol, then 2 knives. Either they were honest or they had more weapons I couldn't see, probably both. I opened the door with the revolver raised, keeping the threshold between us. 2 men stood in the dusty yard, hands visible, squinting in the harsh sunlight. One was maybe 50, weathered and lean with a gray beard and kind eyes. The other was younger, mid-30s, with dark skin and a watchful expression. Behind them sat a pickup truck that looked like it had been rebuilt from 3 different vehicles, mismatched panels, crude welding, a cargo bed covered with salvaged tarps. You alone? The older one, Jacob, asked. Does it matter? I suppose not. He smiled slightly. Can we come in, out of the sun? We've got food to share if you're willing to talk. Food, water information. It could still be a trap, but I was dying anyway. Might as well die with some answers. I let them in. They sat on the floor while I kept my distance and my weapon ready. From their packs, they produced actual provisions, dried meat, crackers that weren't stale, a canteen that sloshed with water. My mouth flooded with saliva at the sight. Eat, Jacob said, pushing the food toward me. You look like you need it more than we do. Pride said refuse. Survival said eat. I ate, forcing myself to go slowly when every cell in my body screamed to devour it all. The water they offered, half a cup, carefully measured, was the most beautiful thing I'd tasted in months. Now talk, I said between bites. What's this about water? Porter spoke for the first time. His voice was softer than I expected, educated. There's a place, west of here, in the foothills where the plains start rising toward the Rockies. The drought hasn't hit as hard there, different weather patterns, higher elevation, something about the topography creating localized precipitation. They've got springs, real flowing water. Bull, I said flatly. I've been tracking weather patterns for over a year. There's no rain west of here. The blocking high extends all the way to the mountain front. Not rain, Jacob interjected. Snowmelt. The high peaks still get winter precipitation, and it feeds underground aquifers that surface in specific locations. The settlement there, they call it Coldwater, they've been surviving on it. More than surviving. They're building something. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to believe it so badly I could feel the hope like a physical ache in my chest. But hope had become dangerous. Hope made you stupid, made you take risks you couldn't afford. Why tell me? I asked. Why drive 200 miles to find some radio broadcaster in the middle of nowhere? Because Coldwater is trying to rebuild communication networks, Porter said. They've got engineers, people who understand the technology. They're setting up relay stations, trying to map where survivors are, coordinate resource sharing. They heard your broadcasts. They want you to join them. They want my expertise, I corrected. Weather knowledge, that's what I have to trade. They want both, Jacob said quietly. Your knowledge and your voice. You've been keeping people alive with your broadcasts, Elena. Giving them information, hope, connection. That matters. That's worth something in Coldwater. The fact that he knew my name should have alarmed me, but I'd said it on air enough times. What alarmed me more was the growing realization that I was considering this. Actually considering abandoning the station, walking away from the only security I had toward a place that might not exist. How far? I asked. 230 miles, Porter said. Rough terrain, no functional roads for most of it. In the truck, maybe 4 days if we don't run into trouble. On foot. He trailed off, the implication clear. On foot, dehydrated and weak, I wouldn't make it halfway. We're leaving tomorrow morning, Jacob added. We can take you with us, there's room. I looked at my water containers. Half a gallon, 2 days. I looked at the station, Harold's legacy, my refuge, my purpose for over a year. I looked at these two strangers who could be saviors or murderers or something in between. I need to think, I said. They nodded and settled in to wait, sharing more food, more water. Small kindnesses that could be strategy or could be genuine human decency. I couldn't tell anymore. The apocalypse had made me paranoid, suspicious of gifts, expecting betrayal from every interaction. That night, while they slept in the corner, Jacob snoring softly, Porter keeping one eye half open in a practiced survivor's rest, I tried to make contact with my usual network. I cranked the generator quietly and sent out calls on the frequencies I knew. Shepard responded first. His voice was weak, breaking up. Elena, good to hear you. We're not doing well, down to 9 people. Water's gone, we're moving. Don't know where, then silence. I called for 10 minutes. Nothing came back, Prophet was next. Her signal was stronger but frantic. Fires jumped the ridge, we're evacuating. If anyone's listening, the Rockies are burning, everything's burning. God have mercy on, static swallowed the rest. I tried for Canary, even though they'd been silent for weeks. Nothing, just the empty hiss of dead frequencies. I was losing my network. The voices that had kept me tethered to humanity were going dark one by one. Soon I'd be alone, truly alone, broadcasting to no one. The decision crystallized in that moment. Stay here and die with my pride intact, or risk everything on the possibility that Coldwater was real. But doubt gnawed at me. What if this was an elaborate con? What if they were raiders using a sophisticated approach, gaining my trust before robbing me or worse? What if Cold Water existed, but was a nightmare of exploitation and violence dressed up in pretty promises? I'd heard stories of settlements that were really just forced labor camps, warlord fiefdoms, places where women were currency and strength was the only law that mattered. I studied Jacob and Porter in their sleep. Their gear was well maintained, but not excessive. They'd shared food they didn't have to share. They'd respected my boundaries, hadn't pushed when I said I needed to think. These were positive signs, but they proved nothing. Intelligent predators knew how to play the long game. Morning came with another wall of heat. The thermometer outside read 119 degrees by 8 a.m. Inside the station, even with insulation, it was approaching 100. Jacob and Porter packed their gear with efficient, practiced movements. "Decision time," Jacob said, not unkindly, but firmly. I looked around the station one more time. At Harold's log book, filled with desperate hope and slow defeat. At the equipment I'd maintained, the sanctuary I'd defended. At the grave out back where Minerva was buried. At the life I'd built from catastrophe's scraps. Then I looked at my water container. The last half-gallon catching morning light through the window. "If you're lying," I said slowly, "if cold water doesn't exist, or if it's some kind of trap, I will use my last bullet on you. Not on myself, on you, understand?" Jacob met my eyes and nodded. "Understood and fair. Then I'm coming, but I'm bringing the portable transmitter, and I'm broadcasting our route. If we don't arrive at cold water, if something happens to me, there will be a record." "We wouldn't have it any other way," Porter said. I spent the next hour preparing. Packed my essential gear, the portable transmitter, batteries, my weather instruments, Harold's logbook, the few photos I had of Daniel and Minerva and Maria. Filled every container with the last of my water. Scavenged the final cans of food. Left a note on the desk for anyone who might come after. Gone west to Cold Water Settlement. Coordinates broadcast on 15:20 a.m. Station equipment free to use, stay alive. Elena Vasquez. Before we left, I did one final broadcast. "This is Elena Vasquez, KZADM. I'm leaving the station. Heading west with travelers who claim there's water, there's community, there's hope. I don't know if it's true, but I'm choosing to find out. To anyone listening, sometimes survival means staying. Sometimes it means moving. Know the difference. Trust your instincts, and remember that we're not just trying to survive. We're trying to stay human. I'll broadcast again when I can. Until then, stay alive." I cranked the generator one last time, sending those words into the static. Then I locked the station door, left the key under the loose foundation stone, and climbed into the truck bed with my pack and my revolver and my fragile, terrifying hope. As we drove west into the wavering heat shimmer, I watched the station disappear in the dust behind us. Either I was driving toward salvation or toward my death, but at least I was moving. At least I was choosing action over slow decay. The drought-cracked earth stretched endlessly ahead. Somewhere beyond it, maybe, was water, was cold water, was a future that looked different than the dying present. The storm hit on day 3 of our journey, just as we reached the Badlands where the prairie breaks into canyons and mesas. We'd been making good time despite the terrain. Jacob knew the routes, the places where bridges hadn't collapsed, where rockslides hadn't blocked the way. Porter navigated with an old topographical map and a compass, calling out directions like a ship's captain steering through treacherous waters. I rode in the truck bed, wrapped in tarps against the sun, rationing my water and watching the sky with growing unease. I'd seen the signs building since morning. The barometric pressure had been dropping steadily. I could feel it in my sinuses, that distinctive ache behind my eyes. The horizon had taken on a greenish tinge that made my stomach clench. Cumulonimbus clouds were building to the northwest, their tops shearing off in the jet stream, anvil-shaped and ominous. This wasn't going to be dust. This was going to be weather, real weather, the dangerous kind. "We need to find shelter," I called through the cab's rear window. "Storm coming, big one." Jacob glanced back at me, then at the sky. "How long?" 2 hours, maybe less. "This is going to be severe. There's nothing out here," Porter said, scanning the barren landscape. just rocks and dead grass. There's Masonville, Jacob said quietly, or what's left of it, about 10 miles ahead. Ghost town now, but some structures still standing. We pushed the truck harder, the engine protesting, temperature gauge climbing toward red. The clouds behind us were building into a wall of black that looked solid enough to touch. Lightning flickered in its depths, not the scattered strikes of a normal storm, but constant, aggressive electrical discharge. The air felt charged, making my hair stand on end even under the tarp. Then I saw something that made my blood freeze. The cloud base was rotating. "Supercell," I shouted. "This thing's going to spawn tornadoes. We need underground shelter, not just buildings." Jacob cursed and pressed the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, eating the broken road in desperate gulps, but I could see we weren't going to make it. The storm was moving faster than meteorologically possible, driven by dynamics I couldn't understand without data, without models. The old rules didn't apply anymore. Climate chaos had rewritten atmospheric physics into something savage and unpredictable. Masonville appeared as a cluster of ruined shapes against the darkening sky. A main street of collapsed storefronts, a church steeple tilted at an impossible angle, houses with their roofs torn off and walls caved in. It looked like a tornado had already been through here, but Jacob drove straight toward what remained of a brick school building. "Basement," he said tersely, "built in the 1920s, solid construction." We screeched to a stop as the first fat raindrops hit, not normal rain, but supercooled droplets the size of quarters that hit like punches. We grabbed our gear and ran for the school entrance, the temperature dropping 20 degrees in 30 seconds. My breath came out in visible puffs. The rain turned to hail golf balls of ice that shattered against the ground with explosive force. The school's front doors were gone, the hallway beyond dark and strewn with debris. Jacob led us by memory or instinct, turning left, then right, finding a stairwell that descended into blackness. The basement was flooded with 2 feet of stagnant water that reeked of decay, but it was shelter. We waded in, our legs immediately numbing from the cold. That's when we heard the others, voices echoing from deeper in the basement, multiple people. My hand went to my revolver, but Jacob caught my wrist. "Easy," he whispered. "Might be other travelers seeking shelter, or might be raiders who'd claimed this place, or worse." A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, blinding us. "Don't move." A woman's voice, hard and commanding, weapons on the ground. Now we were exposed, nowhere to run, standing knee-deep in putrid water with a supercell bearing down above us. I calculated odds, distances, reaction times, 4 bullets in my revolver, at least 3 voices in the darkness. "Bad math. We're just seeking shelter from the storm," Jacob said calmly. "We don't want trouble." "Then you shouldn't have come to Masonville." The flashlight shifted, and I could make out shapes, 5 people, maybe 6, arranged defensively around what looked like stacked supplies covered in plastic sheeting. "This is our salvage site." Above us, the building shuddered. The roar outside had become deafening, a freight train sound that every Midwesterner knows in their bones. "Tornado." "Listen," I said urgently, "I'm a meteorologist. That's an EF3 or stronger tornado directly above us. This basement is the only chance any of us have. We can sort out territory disputes if we survive." The woman with the flashlight, I could see her now, young, maybe 25, with a rifle that looked military, laughed bitterly. "Meteorologist, what good is that when the sky's trying to kill us every other day?" The building shook again, harder. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Somewhere above, something massive crashed. "Everyone against the walls," I commanded, using my emergency broadcast voice. Away from the ceiling center, "Cover your heads. This is going to get worse." Before the tornado hit the school directly. The noise was beyond description, not just sound but physical force that compressed your chest and made thought impossible. The ceiling cracked, concrete chunks falling into the water with tremendous splashes. The air pressure dropped so fast my ears popped painfully. The stagnant water started swirling, pulled by the vortex above. One of the woman's group, a teenager, couldn't be more than 16, panicked and ran for the stairs. The woman tried to grab him, but he was already climbing, desperate to escape the collapsing basement. I didn't think. I just moved. Dropped my pack, dove through the water, caught the kid's legs just as the stairwell collapsed. We went down together into the filthy water, debris raining around us. Something sharp raked across my shoulder. The kid was screaming, fighting me, but I held on, dragged him back toward the wall where the others huddled. The tornado passed as suddenly as it had arrived. The roaring faded to wind and rain and hail. The basement ceiling held mostly, though cracks spiderwebbed across it and water now poured through in steady streams. I let go of the kid, who scrambled back to his group. My shoulder was bleeding, shirt torn, but nothing felt broken. The woman with the rifle was staring at me. "You saved Marcus," she said, tone unreadable. "We all saved each other by being down here," I replied, wringing water from my hair. "That's how survival works now." She lowered the rifle slightly. "I'm Danny. This is my crew. We've been working this area for 3 months, salvaging what's left." "Finding anything useful?" Porter asked. "Medical supplies mostly." The hospital basement stayed dry. Antibiotics, surgical equipment, things that are worth more than food now. My mind raced. Medical supplies. Coldwater could use those. These people could use Coldwater. "Ever heard of a settlement called Coldwater?" I asked. Danny's eyes sharpened. "Rumors, supposed to be some kind of promised land up in the foothills. Water, power, civilization, sounds too good to be true." "We're heading there," Jacob said. "Have been for 3 days. If you've got medical supplies, they'd probably trade well, better than sitting on them until they expire." "If it exists," Danny said skeptically. Above us, the storm was weakening but still dangerous. We were trapped together, former strangers forced into proximity by weather that wanted us all dead equally. The kid I'd saved, Marcus, was shivering in shock maybe. One of Danny's other people, an older man with a medical cross on his jacket, was checking him over. "It exists," Porter said with quiet conviction. "I've been there, left my wife and daughter there while I came out recruiting. They have water, solar power, greenhouses, a functioning community of about 300 people. They need medical supplies. They need medical knowledge." He looked at the man with the medical cross. "Are you a doctor, paramedic?" the man said, "or was before. Name's Eugene. Coldwater needs paramedics." Danny looked at her people, some silent communication passing between them. They were surviving here, but barely, scavenging the ruins, fighting over scraps, waiting for the next disaster. It wasn't living. "How far?" she asked. 70 miles from here," Jacob said. "We could make it in a day if the truck still runs. Your people could follow. Or we could all go together," I suggested. "Pool resources, safety in numbers." Danny considered this. The basement continued flooding, water now waist deep and rising. We'd have to leave soon regardless, trust or no trust. "You saved Marcus," she said finally. "That bought you some good faith. But if this Coldwater place is a lie, or if you're leading us into something bad, then you're well armed and outnumber us," I pointed out. "The risk is more ours than yours." She almost smiled at that. "Fair point." The storm passed in another hour, leaving devastation above. The school was gone, reduced to rubble. The truck had been rolled but miraculously landed upright, windshield shattered, but engine intact. Danny's group had 2 vehicles hidden in a reinforced garage that had survived. We spent the rest of the day salvaging what we could from Masonville, loading medical supplies, food, anything useful. That evening, as we prepared to convoy toward Coldwater, Danny approached me. "That was brave, what you did for Marcus. Stupid, but brave." "Instinct," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. It had been a choice, a split-second decision that I'd survived purely by luck. Most people's instincts these days are to save themselves. "Most people are dying alone," I replied. "I'd rather die trying to help someone than live knowing I didn't." She nodded slowly. "Maybe this Coldwater place has the right idea then, building something instead of just surviving." As we drove west in the dying light, our conv of 9 souls and 3 vehicles, I realized something had shifted. Not just in our circumstances, but in me. For over a year, I'd been a voice in isolation, broadcasting hope I didn't feel to people I couldn't see. Now I was part of something tangible, a group, however temporary, moving toward a goal, however uncertain. The storm had been a test, maybe, Not just of survival, but of humanity, whether we'd help each other when it mattered, when there was nothing to gain and everything to lose. We'd passed. Barely, messily, but we'd passed. Cold water was still 2 days away, still possibly a myth or a disappointment. But for the first time since the flare, I wasn't facing the unknown alone. That had to count for something. The radio equipment in my pack had survived the flooding, sealed in plastic. Tomorrow I'd broadcast again, tell whoever was listening about Masonville, about the storm, about strangers becoming allies in a basement flooding with filthy water. About how sometimes the turning point isn't a discovery or a revelation, but a choice to trust, to risk, to believe that other people might be worth saving even when saving yourself is hard enough. The morning after the storm, we stood on what used to be Highway 34, looking at a world rearranged by wind and violence. The tornado hadn't just destroyed Masonville, it had carved a scar across the landscape a mile wide, erasing everything in its path. Dead cattle lay scattered like broken toys. A combine harvester sat upside down in what used to be a creek bed. A house, intact, whole, had been lifted and set down 300 yards from its foundation, as if a giant child had been playing with blocks. Marcus, the kid I'd pulled back from the stairs, wouldn't look at me. Survivor's guilt, maybe, or embarrassment at his panic. I understood both. The arithmetic of survival was cruel. Why did we live when others died? Why did that basement hold when the school above collapsed? There were no answers, just random chance dressed up as fate. Danny's group had lost 1 vehicle to the storm. We redistributed supplies, squeezed 9 people into 2 trucks, and continued west. The medical supplies they'd salvaged were wrapped in plastic, protected like holy relics. Antibiotics that could stop infection, insulin that could save diabetics, morphine for the kind of pain that made people beg for death. In the old world, these were common, manufactured by the millions. Now they were irreplaceable treasures, expiring a little more each day. The landscape changed as we climbed in elevation. The dead brown of drought gave way to patches of green, actual living grass, stunted scrub oak, even a few wildflowers clinging to north-facing slopes where moisture lasted a little longer. My chest tightened at the sight. Life. Stubborn, persistent life. Porter guided us through paths that weren't on any map, routes worn by survivors fleeing the plains for the promise of mountain water. We passed abandoned vehicles, their occupants long gone, either made it to where they were going or didn't. Some had messages painted on them, "Gone to Denver. Mary, if you find this, we went north. No gas left, sorry." Each one a story ended or interrupted. On the second day, we started seeing signs of habitation. Gardens planted in highway medians where runoff collected. Solar panels on rooftops that hadn't collapsed. A windmill spinning lazily, actually pumping water into a stock tank where horses, living horses, stood drinking. My throat closed at the sight. I hadn't seen healthy animals in over a year. "Getting close," Jacob said quietly. Then we crested a ridge, and there it was. Cold water. It wasn't what I'd imagined, not some pristine paradise or high-tech enclave. It was raw, improvised, clearly built from salvage and determination, but it was alive. Greenhouses made from recovered windows and plastic sheeting, buildings reinforced with scavenged materials, solar panel arrays that actually tracked the sun, and everywhere, the sound of running water. A creek ran through the center of the settlement, clear and cold from mountain snowmelt. Children were playing in it. Children, playing. The sight hit me so hard I had to sit down in the truck bed, my legs suddenly unable to support the weight of that much hope. Guards met us at the perimeter, organized, armed, but not aggressive. They recognized Porter immediately, and he vouched for the rest of us. We were assigned to quarantine quarters. Apparently new arrivals had to be isolated for a week to ensure they weren't carrying diseases. It was civilization, rules, structure, things I'd forgotten could exist. The quarantine building was a converted machine shop with beds, actual beds with mattresses, and a water tap that ran whenever you turned it. I sat on the floor and let it run over my hands for 10 minutes, watching clear water disappear down a drain that went somewhere other than nowhere. Danny found me there, crying silently. It's real, she said, voice wondering. It's actually real. Through the quarantine week, we were evaluated. What skills did we have? What knowledge? What could we contribute? Eugene, the paramedic, was immediately in demand. Danny and her people had mechanical skills, salvaging experience. And me, they wanted me for exactly what Jacob had promised: weather prediction, climate analysis, the ability to help them prepare for what was coming. A woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, ran Coldwater's planning committee. She was 60, sharp, had been a climatologist at NCAR before the collapse. She grilled me for hours about what I'd observed, the patterns I'd tracked, the data I'd collected. She had bad news and worse news. The climate system isn't recovering, she said bluntly. It's seeking a new equilibrium, but that process will take decades, maybe centuries. The jet stream disruption is essentially permanent at this point. We've crossed too many tipping points. So this is it? I asked. Permanent drought, superstorms, temperature extremes. In this region, yes. Other areas are flooding, the coasts, the Great Lakes region. The Amazon has become a grassland. The Sahara is getting rainfall. The entire global precipitation pattern has shifted. We're in one of the sacrifice zones. Sacrifice zones, areas that the new climate would render uninhabitable. It was a term from the old world, when we still thought we could choose which places to save. But Coldwater has water, I pointed out. For now, the snowpack is declining each year. We have maybe a decade before this creek runs dry. We're not building a permanent settlement here. We're building an ark. She showed me their real project, preserving knowledge, gathering survivors, preparing for an eventual migration to wherever the new climate patterns would allow human life to flourish. They were creating a mobile civilization, ready to move when the water ran out. We're also trying to re-establish communication networks, she explained. Your broadcasting experience is invaluable. We've been working on a relay system, trying to reach other survivor communities, coordinate resources, share information. They gave me a workspace, a small room with radio equipment salvaged from across the region. Some of it was military grade, hardened against EMPs, but abandoned when the military fractured. I spent days getting it operational, and then, for the first time in weeks, I broadcast again. This is Elena Vasquez, broadcasting from Coldwater Settlement. Coordinates follow for anyone seeking shelter and community. We have water, we have food production, we have medical supplies, but more than that, we have a plan. We're not just surviving, we're preparing for what comes next. The responses came slowly, voices from the static, some familiar, most not. Shepard had made it to another settlement in Wyoming, barely, having lost 3 more people on the journey. He wept when he heard my voice. Prophet was still alive, had found a canyon with a spring, was teaching a group of children how to read and write and find God in a godless world. Even Canary returned. Equipment failure had silenced them, but they'd repaired it, were still monitoring seismic activity, still providing warnings. My network was reforming, but differently. Not isolated voices in the darkness, but nodes in a growing web of connection. Marcus found me one evening as I was finishing a broadcast. He stood in the doorway, awkward, shuffling his feet. I never thanked you, he said quietly, for pulling me back in the basement. You don't need to. I do, though. I was ready to die, not brave or anything, just tired. Tired of being scared all the time. Tired of never knowing if tomorrow would be worse than today. But you didn't let me give up. Nobody gets to give up, I said, though gentler than the words might sound. Not while others are still fighting. He nodded and left, but I thought about his words long after. Was I fighting or just persisting? What was the difference? At night, I'd walk along the creek, listening to water move over stones. Such a simple sound, but it had become exotic, precious. Sometimes I'd see fish, actual living fish, darting in the pools. The children had named them, made up stories about their adventures. Children adapting to a broken world by finding magic in what remained. Dr. Chen was right, nature wasn't healing. The damage was too severe, the systems too disrupted, but life was adapting, finding new patterns, new ways to persist. The cottonwoods along the creek had leaves again. Birds had returned, Not many, not the diversity that once existed, but enough to remind us that the sky wasn't entirely empty. At dawn, I'd hear them calling to each other, establishing territory, seeking mates, doing what life does, continuing. I thought about Daniel often, wondering if he would recognize who I'd become. The Alina he'd known had been precise, controlled, comfortable in her climate-controlled office with her computer models and satellite data. This Alina had killed to survive 2 raiders 3 months into the collapse when they'd tried to take the station. This Alina had learned to find water by reading the landscape, predict weather by the ache in her bones, measure hope in smaller and smaller increments. But this Alina had also learned something the old one never knew, that survival wasn't a solo act. It was communal, messy, complicated. It required trust and sacrifice and the willingness to save strangers in flooded basements. It required believing in places like Coldwater even when belief felt foolish. The settlement wasn't perfect. There were conflicts over resources, power struggles over decisions. The constant stress of knowing this was temporary. But it was something. 187 people. Population had grown by 40 since I'd arrived, working toward a common goal. Survival, yes, but survival with purpose. We were archiving knowledge, teaching children, preserving what we could of human achievement while preparing for a journey to somewhere else. Somewhere the new climate might allow us to root again. I still broadcast every day. My audience has grown, dozens of settlements scattered across the continent, sharing information, coordinating migrations, warning each other of dangers. We're mapping the new world, slowly, transmission by transmission. Where water can be found, where raiders control territory, where the weather has made life impossible, where communities like Coldwater offer hope, the world we knew is gone. The stable climate that allowed civilization to flourish for 10,000 years has ended, replaced by chaos we're still learning to navigate. We are living through the great dying, the 6th extinction, watching ecosystems collapse in real time. There is no going back, no recovery to what was, but we are still here, still human, still capable of kindness in basements and courage in storms, still able to find beauty in creek water and children's laughter and voices crackling through static to say, I'm alive, are you? This is Alina Vasquez. If you're hearing this, you're listening to what might be my last broadcast from Coldwater. Not because I'm dying, though we all are, just at different speeds, but because tomorrow we begin the migration. The creek ran dry 3 days ago. We knew it was coming. The snowpack in the high peaks has been declining steadily. This winter brought only 60% of last year's accumulation, which was itself a record low. Dr. Chen's models were accurate. We got our decade almost exactly. 10 years of relative stability in an unstable world. 10 years to prepare for this moment. I'm sitting in the radio room one last time, watching the sun set through a window we salvaged from a demolished school. The glass is warped, making the world outside look like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Fitting, maybe, everything feels distorted now, unclear, bleeding into something else. Coldwater's population has grown to 412 souls. We've become good at goodbyes. People arrive, stay for a while, move on when they need to. But this is different. This is all of us together, abandoning the only stable home many of us have known since the collapse. The children born here, 37 of them now, have never known anywhere else. Tomorrow they'll become nomads, inheritors of a wandering world. The plan is ambitious, maybe impossible. We're heading northeast, toward the Great Lakes region, where the new weather patterns have created what our scouts describe as livable conditions. Excessive rainfall, flooding, but manageable with the right infrastructure. Water, the thing we're dying for here, is apparently drowning other places. The irony would be funny if it weren't so cruel. 412 people, 73 vehicles that sometimes run, solar panels strapped to roofs, seed banks sealed in temperature-controlled containers. Hard drives containing fragments of human knowledge, Wikipedia downloads, medical databases, engineering manuals, literature, music, art. We're a traveling museum of the before times, carrying what we can of who we were while trying to become who we need to be. I've been thinking about Harold Zimmerman lately. The radio operator who died at this console before I found it. His last words in his logbook, someone has to. That's become my mantra, my prayer, my answer to why we keep going. Someone has to preserve the knowledge. Someone has to teach the children. Someone has to keep broadcasting, keep the network alive, keep the voices connected across the dying continent. Someone has to remember. Maria, my sister Maria, found us 6 months ago. She walked out of the eastern wastes like a miracle, following radio signals, following rumors, following hope I'd stopped believing in. She'd been in Sacramento when the flare hit, then Portland, then a commune in the Rockies, then a failed settlement near Salt Lake. She's 43 now, hair gone gray, missing 2 fingers from frostbite, but alive. Impossibly, beautifully alive. I knew you'd be on the radio, she said when she arrived. Even at the end of the world, you'd be talking about the weather. She was right. Even now, especially now, I document the patterns. Today's temperature, 97 degrees F at dawn, 131 degrees F at noon, dropping to an expected 45 degrees F tonight. Barometric pressure suggesting high pressure dominance for the next week. No precipitation in 47 days. Dust storm probability high, but I document other things too. Marcus, the boy I pulled from the collapsing stairs, is 19 now and leading a scout team. He's brave in a way that has nothing to do with the absence of fear and everything to do with acting despite it. Danny runs our defense council, teaching people that strength isn't about weapons, but about knowing when not to use them. Eugene has trained 14 new medics, creating medical knowledge where none existed, passing on skills that can't be Googled anymore. Prophet's community joined us last year, bringing 60 people and a belief system that's evolved into something I barely recognize as Christianity, more focused on earth stewardship than salvation, more interested in feeding the hungry than converting the lost. She still broadcasts scripture, but now it's usually about rebuilding, replanting, restoring. And God said, "Let there be light," has become less about creation and more about keeping the solar panels functional. Shepard died 2 winters ago. Pneumonia, the old killer that antibiotics could have cured if we'd had any left. His last broadcast was just names, reading out every person in his community, making sure they were remembered, documented, real. I have the recording. Sometimes I play it when I need to remember that we're not just statistics in humanity's decline. The world continues to transform. Satellites that survived the flare are falling, their orbits decaying, creating meteor showers that the children watch with wonder. The auroras come further south each year, painting the night sky with colors that shouldn't exist at this latitude. Plants we've never seen before are sprouting, mutations, adaptations, evolution in fast forward. Life finding ways we didn't predict, couldn't model, wouldn't have believed. Yesterday, a scout team found something extraordinary 60 miles north. A field of sunflowers, thousands of them, growing wild, their faces tracking the brutal sun. No one planted them. They just appeared, seeds dormant in the soil for who knows how long, waiting for conditions that would let them flourish. They're different from the sunflowers we remember, shorter, their leaves thicker, waxy, adapted to conserve water. But they're alive, abundant, defiant. We're harvesting the seeds, of course. We'll carry them with us, plant them where we settle next, spread them to other communities. Let them adapt further, evolve, become whatever they need to become to survive this new world. That's what we're doing too, isn't it? Adapting, evolving, becoming something different than we were. The humans who inherit this planet, if humans inherit it at all, won't be like us. They'll be harder, more cooperative, less wasteful. They'll know things we forgot, how to read the sky, how to find water, how to survive without the infrastructure we thought was civilization, but was really just comfort. But they'll also know things we're just learning. That isolation kills faster than dehydration. That hope shared is hope doubled. That humanity isn't about being human, it's about choosing to be humane when being cruel would be easier. Tomorrow, when we pack up this radio equipment and begin our migration, I'll keep broadcasting. From the road, from camps, from whatever temporary shelter we find, the network must continue. The voices must stay connected. Even if it's just to say, we're still here, we're still moving, we're still human. I don't know if we'll make it to the Great Lakes. I don't know if the water there is real or just another desperate rumor in a world built on them. I don't know if humanity has a future or if we're just the last generation to remember electricity. But I know this: tomorrow the sun will rise and we'll pack our salvaged solar panels to catch its light. Children will complain about walking and their parents will tell them stories to make the miles pass faster. Someone will share their last can of peaches because someone else looks hungrier. We'll argue about which route to take, then compromise on something nobody's happy with but everyone can live with. We'll bury whoever doesn't make it and carry their names forward with the rest. We'll survive another day. Not because we're strong or special or chosen, but because that's what life does. It persists, it adapts, it continues. This is Elena Vasquez, signing off from Coldwater Settlement, preparing to sign on from somewhere else tomorrow. To anyone listening, anyone struggling, anyone wondering if they're the last, you're not. We're out here, we're moving, we're surviving.